Are y'all ready for this? This right here, if you understand it and believe it and live it, is your ticket to freedom right now where you sit. 1. Whereas it is established that a government's authority and existence are derived exclusively from the consent of the governed, as enshrined in the Constitution, which mandates that all governmental powers are exercised based on this consent to be governed. 2. Whereas consent must be explicitly granted and cannot be assumed, it must be informed and voluntary for any legal or contractual obligation to be valid. 3. Whereas establishing a valid contract requires evidence of offer, genuine assent, capacity, and consideration, with each element being demonstrable and verifiable. 4. Whereas compelling performance without explicit consent conflicts with the fundamental principle that authority derives from the consent of the governed and undermines the legitimacy of such authority. 5. Whereas any obligation imposed by the court must be substantiated by evidence of a contract, including the essential elements of offer, acceptance, consideration, and capacity. 6. Whereas jurisdiction assumes a general consent to be governed, but specific actions require explicit consent, and failure to obtain such consent can challenge the court's authority in those instances. 7. Whereas explicitly withdrawing consent to be governed can affect the court's jurisdiction over me in specific contexts unless legally contested and properly addressed. 8. Whereas to explicitly withdraw my consent, I am entitled to communicate my intent in writing, clearly state my reasons, and file this documentation with the court. 9. Whereas I acknowledge that while withdrawing consent may impact my participation, it does not negate the right of any party to claim and prove that I have caused injury, provided they meet the burden of proof. This principle ensures that any claims, including those in Reblevin, must be substantiated with evidence of actual injury or loss. 10. Whereas, if a claim is made that I have failed to honor a contract, it must be supported by evidence that the contract in question meets the requirements of a valid contract, including offer, acceptance, consideration, and capacity. Specifically, banks and individuals utilizing credit created from nothing cannot prove actual loss and therefore lack standing to bring such claims before a court. Claims based on such credit cannot substantiate a legitimate claim of non-performance. 11. Whereas any court order compelling performance where no loss can be proven and no valid consideration is provided will violate the principle of consent of the governed and undermine the very authority upon which such orders are based. This principle is crucial in ensuring that all claims and orders, including those for recovery of specific property, are founded on legitimate and verifiable legal grounds. 12. Whereas I do not accept illusory promises as valid consideration, including bank credit, which was once a promise of a conversion into a fixed monetary metal, but now lacks tangible value. Furthermore, I do not acknowledge any contract if the consideration is non-convertible fiat currency, such as US dollars, Federal Reserve notes, or bank credit. This position ensures that all claims and contracts are based on valid and tangible consideration. 13. Whereas possession and usage are recognized as evidence of ownership rather than mere title. Title and ownership must be proven to be obtained through lawful means or through demonstrated prior possession and usage. Without such proof, title alone does not establish ownership. 14. Furthermore, I explicitly challenge the enforcement of any title or claim obtained by virtue of a non-verifiable contract, Such titles or claims lack legitimacy if the underlying contract does not meet the criteria of a valid, verifiable agreement as outlined by the principles of offer, acceptance, consideration, capacity. 15. Therefore, I explicitly withdraw my consent to be compelled to perform any action by order of this court, asserting my right to not be compelled without my explicit consent. This withdrawal of consent is consistent with my right to challenge any enforcement based on invalid or non-verifiable contracts. 16. Therefore, I honor the right of any party to remedy non-performance, including the court, provided that it can be established that I have failed to perform under a valid contract. Any such claim must be substantiated by evidence of a valid contract, including offer, acceptance, consideration, and capacity. This ensures that any remedy for non-performance is based on legally sound and verifiable contractual obligations. 17. Whereas, I expect any and all words used in this affidavit to be interpreted by their plain meanings and not in any special or technical meanings. And then finally, 18. Whereas, no past court decisions or decrees shall be construed as granting authority to violate the principle of consent of the governed, as this principle is fundamental to the legitimacy and exercise of judicial authority. If you'd like to read that text in its entirety, you can find it on my blog, thinkingwithzach.blogspot.com. It's linked in my bio. Thank you.